I wanted to make a video on Anton Chekhov, specifically his short stories, and just briefly talk about their appeal to me personally and recommend some of my favorites. I picked this book up because my dad had recommended it, unknowing to the fact that it will become one of my favorites from this year. By many, Anton Chekhov is deemed one of the greatest writers to have existed, and after reading his stories, I agree. That's not to say that everyone will find his writing enjoyable. A lot of people may find it boring, but there is a reason his stories are still well loved to this day. Anton Chekhov is a Russian playwright and short story writer, born in 1860 and died in 1904. He was a physician and initially wrote stories as a means of earning money. He is credited to have said, "Medicine is my lawful wife and literature is my mistress." The reason I feel so drawn to his stories is because of their relatable and comforting nature. Chekhov's writing is like a mirror reflecting the human soul. The characters he writes about I have met, and the events he talks about I have gone through. I get a strange feeling of melancholy reading his writing, but it is one infused with humor and understanding. He perfectly depicts that feeling of yearning that humans feel constantly throughout all aspects of their lives, and it's just such a pleasant experience to read his work. As for the stories that I recommend, one of my favorites is Difficult People. The story revolves around family and the theme of control. Familial bond can be a beautiful thing, but it could also be the reason that you are subjected to misfortune. In a way, it can trap people with very few means of escape. He bowed to her and smiled all over his face, and at once he caught himself in that smile, which was so out of place with his gloomy mood. Where did it come from if his heart was full of vexation and misery? And he thought nature itself had given man this capacity for lying, that even in difficult moments of spiritual strain, he might be able to hide the secrets of his nest as the fox and the wild duck do. Every family has its joys and its horrors, but however great they may be, it's hard for an outsider's eye to see them. They are a secret. Another story I really liked was The Kiss. This one, the main character in particular, appealed to me because he is essentially a daydreamer. He is a soldier who is quite reserved and does not think that highly of himself. Him and the other soldiers get invited for tea at a lieutenant's house, and something happens there that consumes this soldier's thoughts completely, and it essentially changes his outlook on life. And the thought that he was an ordinary person, and that his life was ordinary, delighted him and gave him courage. He pictured her and his happiness as he pleased, and put no rein on his imagination. The next story is Champagne, where the main character is a young man who works at a remote train station. And during New Year's Eve, he shares a bottle of champagne with his wife. He drops the bottle and the wife warns him that it's a bad omen. After walking 1.5 miles, I went back. Melancholy thoughts haunted me still. Painful as it was to me, yet I remember I tried as it were to make my thoughts still gloomier and more melancholy. You know, people who are vain and not very clever have moments when the consciousness that they are miserable affords them positive satisfaction, and they even coquette with their misery for their own entertainment. There was a great deal of truth in what I thought, but there was also a great deal that was absurd and conceited. And there was something boyishly defiant in my question: what could happen worse? The next story I recommend is one of his longer ones, and it's Ward Number 6. It's about a psychiatric facility that is poorly run. The town's physician becomes acquainted with one of the 5 inmates, and the inmate has a noticeable impact on him. They spend more and more time together, which causes the people of the town to question whether or not the doctor is fit to continue working. The dialogue and writing in this story is powerful and thought-provoking. I highly recommend it if you are a fan of philosophical musings. I only know that God has created me of warm blood and nerves. Yes, indeed. If organic tissue is capable of life, it must react to every stimulus, and I do. To pain, I respond with tears and outcries. To baseness with indignation, to filth with loathing. To my mind, that is just what is called life. The lower the organism, the less sensitive it is, and the more feebly it reacts to stimulus. and the higher it is, the more responsively and vigorously it reacts to reality. The last story is quite short, but it is the first story I fell in love with of Chekhov's, and it's A Trifle from Life. The theme revolves around childhood and innocence. It follows a man who's living with another woman and her children, and one day he's alone with the woman's son. So, in conclusion, I highly recommend his short stories, and I really want to read some of his plays. If I enjoyed his short stories this much, I'm sure I'll really like his plays as well. I hope you walked away with some short stories to read, and thank you for watching.